It was 1983. A shocking announcement was about to shake the rock world. After nearly a decade of wild stage shows, fire-breathing, and iconic makeup, Kiss, the gods of glam rock, made a bold move. They were taking off the makeup. The band that gave us Detroit Rock City, Love Gun, and Rock and Roll All Night was about to bare their real faces to the world. MTV aired the moment like it was breaking news. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons sat there on camera, makeup-free, letting fans see what they looked like for the very first time. It was surreal. Fans were stunned. Some felt betrayed. Others were curious, but nobody could ignore it. Behind the scenes, though, this wasn't a publicity stunt. It was survival. Kiss had been struggling. Album sales were down. Their last few records weren't hitting like they used to. Ace Frehley had left. Peter Criss was gone too. The magic was fading. Paul Stanley would later admit, the band needed a reset. They hoped that without the makeup, fans would focus on the music again. But what happened next? It wasn't what they hoped for, and decades later, Paul Stanley has finally come clean. Parts of that non-makeup era were pretty awful. Trying to find a new identity. Once the makeup came off, everything changed. Kiss wasn't just changing their look, they were changing their sound. The band that built its name on hard-hitting rock and dramatic anthems was now dabbling in new styles. Synths, pop melodies, and even glam metal started creeping into their songs. Paul Stanley admitted recently, "It was like a time when we weren't sure who we were supposed to be." And it showed. Albums like Animalize, 1984, Asylum, 1985, and Crazy Nights, 1987, took Kiss into strange territory. The hair got bigger, the spandex got brighter. The songs, well, some were hits, but others didn't land. Paul sang his heart out, often carrying the band on his back. Gene S. Simmons during this period was distracted. He was off making movies like Runaway and Trick or Treat, leaving Paul to keep Kiss afloat. It was a strange time. The band was trying to keep up with the MTV crowd. Bands like Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, and Poison were dominating. And Kiss? They were trying to fit in instead of standing out. Paul said it best, "We were chasing trends instead of being the trend." Fans noticed, critics noticed, and so did the band. The music they'd rather forget. Let's talk about the music, because Paul Stanley just admitted it. Some of it was downright bad. Yes, even legends make mistakes. Albums like Hot in the Shade and Crazy Nights had their moments, but they also had tracks that Paul called disposable. In his words, some of it was just not good. He doesn't blame the fans for tuning out during that time. He gets it. The music didn't have the soul that early Kiss records had. It was missing the danger, the grit, the magic. One track Paul openly regrets, My Way, a song off Crazy Nights that sounds more like a Broadway anthem than a rock tune. Big vocals, synth-heavy production, but no bite. And yet Paul had to sing it night after night. He remembers standing on stage, belting out those high notes, thinking, why are we doing this? It wasn't just the songs. It was the identity crisis. Kiss didn't know if they were a metal band, a pop group, or something in between. That confusion bled into the music. And while the band had some commercial success, especially overseas, it didn't feel like real Kiss anymore, at least not to Paul. Holding the band together alone. During the non-makeup years, Paul Stanley became more than the star child. He became the glue. With Gene Simmons distracted by Hollywood, Paul was writing the songs, producing the albums, handling the tours, basically keeping Kiss alive. He later confessed, "It wasn't always fun, but I couldn't let it fall apart." He admits that Gene's absence hurt. The two had always been the core of Kiss, but in the mid to late 80s, Paul was flying solo in more ways than one. There were moments when Paul thought about quitting. He felt alone. Tired, frustrated, but something inside him wouldn't give up. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was love for the band, maybe it was the fans. Whatever it was, he pushed forward. He gave his all on albums like Animalize, and even though he knew it wasn't their best work. In his recent interviews, Paul isn't bitter, but he's honest. That era tested him in ways fans never saw. Looking back, he said, "I'm proud I didn't walk away, even when it felt like I should." The fans who never left, despite the chaos, despite the cheesy videos, despite the questionable songs, some fans never gave up on Kiss, and Paul never forgot that. When the band toured during the non-makeup era, they still filled arenas. The Diehards showed up. They sang every word. They screamed for guitar solos. They wore the t-shirts, even if their heroes didn't wear the face paint anymore. Paul said those fans were the reason he kept going. He remembers nights on tour when he'd look out at the crowd and think, okay, maybe we're still doing something right. Sure, critics mocked them. Radio stations stopped playing their songs. But those who believed in Kiss kept them alive. Paul also shared a surprising truth. Many younger fans discovered Kiss for the first time during that era. Kids who never saw the makeup years thought Lick It Up was the start of the band. For them, it wasn't a comeback, it was a beginning. That gave Paul hope. But deep down, he knew something was missing. The moment it turned around. By the early 90s, something started to shift. Gene Simmons was back. He was more focused, more involved. And together, he and Paul put out Revenge in 1992, a record that many fans see as a return to form. It was heavier, darker, more serious. Paul later said, "That was the first time in a long time where I felt like we were a real band again." Revenge didn't change the world, but it gave Kiss back their identity. It reminded fans and the band what they were capable of. Then in 1996, everything changed. Kiss announced the return of the original lineup, makeup and all, Ace Frehley, Peter Criss, the full show, the pyrotechnics, the fire breathing. It was like stepping into a time machine. Tickets sold out in minutes. Fans wept. Grown men put on face paint. Kiss was back. Paul later admitted, "That moment made everything we went through worth it." The non-makeup years had been a test. But now, the reward was here. Why Paul doesn't hide the past. Some rock stars bury the parts of their careers they don't like. Not Paul Stanley. He owns it. Yes, he thinks some songs were awful. Yes, he admits the band lost their way. But he also believes that without those years, Kiss wouldn't have survived. It was a chapter, he says, and you don't get to skip chapters in life. Paul still sings some of those non-makeup songs live. He still talks about that era with fans, and sometimes he even laughs about it. He remembers the ridiculous outfits, the sky-high vocals, the awkward MTV videos, but he also remembers how it made him tougher, smarter, more grateful. And in a way, that's the power of Kiss. They've been through it all. Breakups, disasters, comebacks, triumphs, and they're still standing. What Kiss means now. With or without makeup, today Paul Stanley is 73 years old. He's been through every phase of fame, failure, and reinvention. And looking back, he doesn't regret the non-makeup era because it taught him who he really was. He's said it again and again. The makeup doesn't make the band. The music does. But even he admits the makeup helps. It's part of the magic, part of the myth. And when the full Kiss machine is in motion, fire, lights, riffs, costumes. It's like no other show on earth. Still, Paul wants fans to remember, even in the worst years, Kiss never stopped. They kept recording, kept touring, kept believing. That's why Kiss is more than a band. It's a story, one with ups, downs, drama, and redemption. And for Paul Stanley, every part of that story, yes, even the awful songs, matters. Because without them, there would be no ending. And this ending is one hell of a ride.